Have you ever looked at your life and found it terrifyingly perfect? I did. For 10 years, my life in Beacon Hill was a work of art. My husband, Nathan Hayes, was the rising star at Apex Global Partners. He was my rock. He was the greatest lie I ever lived. The company's annual gala was his night. He gave his lover, the company lawyer, an invitation. He did not know I gave my invitation to his CEO. When his boss arrived, Nathan did not die. He just choked. My name is Olivia Hayes. I am 38 years old, and my profession is to see. As the senior curator for the Alden Institute, Boston's quiet temple of private art, my life is dedicated to provenance, to the story behind the brushstrokes, to the small hidden signature that separates a masterpiece from a masterful forgery. My eye is, by training and by nature, analytical. I don't just look, I appraise. My husband, Nathan Hayes, is a masterpiece of a different sort. At 40, he is a senior vice president at Apex Global Partners, a private equity firm that consumes ambition and excretes wealth. He is the living archetype of New England success, a Harvard pedigree, a handshake that feels like a promise, and a persuasive charm that has planned smooth every rough edge of his life. He is handsome, he is driven, and he is convincing. Our Beacon Hill townhouse was less a home and more a statement, a $3 million brick and mahogany testament to his ascent. The air inside was always still, carrying the scent of lemon oil and old money. I was standing in our bedroom, the one overlooking the gas lamps of Acorn Street, inspecting the gown I intended to wear to the Apex annual gala. It was a deep, midnight blue silk, appropriate, understated, perfect. The gala was the most important night of Nathan's professional year. He entered the room without a sound, a habit of his. He was already in his tuxedo shirt, the cuffs unlinked. "There she is," he said, his voice the warm, practiced baritone he used on investors. He came up behind me, his hands landing on my shoulders. His touch was firm, proprietary, looking flawless, as always. I met his eyes in the antique mirror. "Just making sure there are no imperfections." "There never are with you. Liv." He kissed my temple. "You are my rock, my anchor. You keep me grounded while I'm out there slaying dragons." It was a beautiful line. He had used it before. Every word, every gesture was perfect. That is when the doorbell chimed, a discordant note in our curated quiet. A few moments later, our housekeeper appeared. "Mrs. Hayes, a courier package for you." It was a simple, unmarked, padded envelope, bearing only the logo of a citywide dispatch service. No sender, no return address. Inside, there was no card, only a small, square velvet box, the kind that should hold earrings, or a pendant. Nathan smiled. "A secret admirer or just a preview of my bonus?" I opened the box. It was not jewelry. Resting on the white satin lining was a single object, a USB flash drive. It was heavy, made of polished silver, and etched with a delicate, intricate pattern. "How strange," Nathan murmured, his eyes narrowing for just a second. "Probably just files from the museum. They know you never stop." He left to finish dressing, his performance complete. I was left alone with the box. I sat at my antique secretary desk, the silk of the gown rustling beside me, and slid the silver drive into my laptop. It was silent. There was no password. A single untitled folder appeared on my desktop. I clicked it. The folder was not filled with documents. It was filled with audio files, dozens of them, labeled only by date. I clicked the most recent one, and the perfect, cold, curated world of my life evaporated. First, his voice, Nathan's, unmistakable, warm, but with an edge I had never heard. Then, a woman's voice, lighter, younger, laced with a sharp, amused arrogance. "And he actually bought it," the woman's voice said, followed by a low laugh. "The whole Rosewood pitch. He thinks it's his idea. He's an old dinosaur, Sienna. He just needs to be pointed at the water," Nathan replied. The beauty is, he'll announce my partnership at the gala, right after we've secured the shell company. He'll be applauding his own execution. Sienna. I knew that name. Sienna Reed, 29 years old, a sharp, raven-haired associate from Apex's internal legal counsel. My stomach hollowed out. It was not just sex, it was worse. They were discussing the Rosewood deal, a major acquisition Nathan was supposedly championing for Apex. They were planning to use a shell company to buy a key property before Apex made its official bid, then sell it back to their own firm at a massively inflated price. They were committing fraud. Then, the sound of movement, a heavy sigh. I have to go, Nathan said. The museum ice queen is expecting me for dinner. God forbid I'm late to appraise the wine. Sienna laughed again, the sound like breaking glass. Poor baby. Does she bore you that much? Or is she just that cold? She's reliable, Nathan's voice said, dismissing me with a single word. Like a good painting, beautiful to look at, adds value to the room, but you don't exactly want to have a conversation with it. I stopped the recording. My hands were perfectly steady. I looked at the blue gown. I looked at the reflection in the dark screen. The masterpiece was a forgery. The perfect frame was shattered. The Apex annual gala was in 48 hours. I did not cry. Tears are an emotional response, and what I felt was a cold, clarifying logic. The ice queen of the museum was now in her element. I closed my laptop, walked downstairs, and poured myself a glass of water, not wine. My hand did not shake. This was not a crime of passion. This was a calculated conspiracy. I returned to the desk and listened to all the files. I listened for hours, until the gas lamps outside flickered off and the first gray light of morning hit the cobblestones. My assessment was correct. The tone between Nathan and Sienna was not one of fevered, secret love. It was the clipped, efficient cadence of partners. They were a strategic alliance. The affair was merely a perk, a convenience that lubricated their primary goal fraud. They were methodically detailing their plan to defraud Apex Global Partners, Nathan's own company, the one he claimed to be slaying dragons for. The USB drive was a crucial piece of evidence. Polished silver, expensive, etched. It was not sent by an anonymous tipster. An outsider would have sent a disposable email. This was personal. This was an insider. This was a statement. My mind immediately went to the only other person I knew inside Apex who was not part of Nathan's polished upper management world, my brother, Julian Vance, 31 years old, smart, sweet, and disastrously weak. I had pulled strings at the Alden, calling in a favor with a board member who also sat on the board of Apex to get Julian his job, a low-level position in the IT department, buried deep in the server rooms. It was supposed to keep him stable after his last bad run, as he called it. I picked up my phone. It was 5:30 in the morning. I knew he would be awake, his hours a wreck of anxiety and bad habits. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice thick. Liv, is everything okay? It's Julian, I said, my voice perfectly flat, cutting him off. I need you to tell me about Sienna Reed. Silence. Then, a sharp intake of breath, followed by a series of stutters. Sienna. The lawyer, I mean. I see her around. She's important. Liv. Why? Stop it, Julian, I said. The coldness in my own voice surprised me. Stop managing me. I know about her and Nathan. I know about the Rosewood deal. A sound came through the phone, a dry, choking sob. It was the sound of a dam breaking. Oh God, Liv, oh God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what to do. The confession spilled out of him, pathetic and desperate. Nathan had discovered it. Of course he had. Nathan misses nothing that can be used. Julian had a gambling debt, a massive one. Over $50,000 to people who do not send polite reminders. Nathan, in his magnanimous, rock-like way, had found out and helped. He had paid it off. All of it. But nothing from Nathan is a gift. It is always a transaction. The price for Julian's salvation was simple. He had to use his administrative access in the IT department. He had to divert certain email chains from internal review. He had to scrub server logs of specific conversations. He had to create blind spots in the company's digital surveillance. Blind spots just large enough for Nathan and Sienna to walk through, carrying their stolen deal. "He was destroying you. Liv!" Julian wept into the phone. "He was destroying me, making me complicit. Every time he came home and kissed you, knowing what I knew, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't live with it." "The USB," I said. It was not a question. "I copied everything," he whispered. "I put it on that drive. I thought if you just knew, you could get away. I didn't know how to tell you." He sent it. My own brother, compromised and terrified, had been the one to hand me the weapon. A different kind of rage, sharp and acidic, flooded my system. It was not just at Nathan for his betrayal. It was at him for finding my brother's weakness and turning it into a tool to betray me. He had weaponized my family. I let Julian cry for another 10 seconds. Then I spoke. "The gambling debt will be paid," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "It will be handled. But that is over. Your old life is over. From now on, Julian, you work for me." With Julian now my asset, the fog of shock fully receded, replaced by the sharp, sterile clarity of a curator preparing an exhibition. My new project, the downfall of Nathan Hayes. The centerpiece was already chosen. The target was not Nathan. Nathan was merely the forgery, the object to be appraised and, ultimately, discredited. The true audience, the only one who mattered, was the buyer he was trying to fool. I spent the next hour in my study, not listening to the audio files, but researching my true target, Arthur Blackwell. At 62, Blackwell was the founder and CEO of Apex Global Partners. He was not New England money. He was a self-made Wall Street typhoon, a legend from the old school. The profiles I read painted a consistent picture, ruthless, intolerant of failure, and possessing an almost pathological hatred for two things: disloyalty and the kind of stupidity that invited public scandal. My analysis was simple. Nathan was not afraid of me. He had proven that. He had laughed at me, dismissed me as a cold, beautiful object. He believed me to be predictable, manageable, and ultimately, weak. But Nathan was terrified of Arthur Blackwell. Blackwell was the father figure he had spent his life trying to impress, the gatekeeper to the kingdom he so desperately wanted. My plan would not be a messy, emotional divorce splashed across Boston society pages. That would be a failure, a public admission of my own poor judgment in acquiring such a flawed piece. No, this had to be a public execution of his career, a clean, undeniable exposure. I called Julian back. His voice was still shaky. "I need the rest of it. Julian," I said, my tone low and clear. "Everything you pretended to delete for him. The originals. I want every email, every wire transfer history for the shell company, and every single audio file from the server backups. I don't want your copies. I want the masters. Can you get them?" "Liv, that's highly secured. If I go back in—" "You already work for me, Julian," I said, cutting him off. "He used you to build his lie. I'm using you to expose it. Get me the files." He was silent for a moment. "Okay, I can do it. But Olivia, what are you going to do?" "Just send it to Blackwell. He'll think you're just a crazy, jealous wife." That was the crux of the problem. Julian had voiced my own primary strategic challenge. I could not approach Arthur Blackwell as Olivia Hayes, the wife. The ice queen of the museum would be dismissed as a woman scorned, hysterical, acting on emotion. My evidence, however potent, would be tainted by the assumption of feminine revenge. I had to approach him as something he understood and respected, a peer, an investor, an appraiser. I looked at the thick cream-colored cardstock on my desk, the invitation that had arrived the week before. In elegant script, it read, Mr. and Mrs. Nathan Hayes. A wave of nausea, the first real emotion I had felt all day, hit me. His rock, his anchor, his +1. The front door opened. It was 7 in the evening. Nathan was home. He walked into the study, loosening his silk tie. The picture of the devoted husband, home late from a hard day of dragon slaying. Sorry I'm late, Liv, he said, not looking up from his briefcase. That last meeting on the Rosewood projections ran forever. We're in the final stretch. He looked up, flashing the smile that had once convinced me. But it will all be worth it. I'm telling you, this gala is it. He walked over, running a hand over my shoulder. I did not flinch. Blackwell all but confirmed it today, he whispered, a conspiratorial excitement in his voice. He's announcing my promotion to partner at the party. We're finally there. He looked at me, waiting for my adulation, my shared celebration in his perfect forgery. I turned my head and gave him the smile I reserved for the Alden's most difficult donors, a smile of polite, impenetrable warmth. I am so looking forward to it. Nathan, I said. His own smile widened. He was satisfied. He had his rock. As he left the room to shower, my eyes settled on the invitation. Mr. and Mrs. Nathan Hayes. He was right. The gala was it. I knew I had to make my move before that night. I had to reach the king before the public coronation of the court jester. I did not call as Mrs. Nathan Hayes. A wife cannot get an emergency meeting with a CEO. I called as Olivia Hayes, a board member of the Alden Institute. My assistant, citing my authority, contacted Arthur Blackwell's private office to request an urgent, in-person consultation. The stated reason a highly sensitive matter concerning a potential endowment that required absolute discretion. The implication of a major donation being at risk, delivered through a channel of institutional peerage, worked. I was given a 20-minute slot the following afternoon. Blackwell's office was on the 60th floor, a corner unit that did not look at the city, but over it, toward the cold gray expanse of the Boston Harbor. The room was vast, silent, and furnished with a heavy, masculine austerity. It was the kind of quiet that cost a fortune. Arthur Blackwell sat behind a desk of black, polished stone that seemed to draw all the light from the room. He did not get up when I entered. He simply gestured to one of 2 hard-backed chairs facing him. Mrs. Hayes, he said. His voice was gravel. He had deliberately used my marital name, a subtle reminder of the context in which he knew me as an attachment to his rising star. My schedule is precise. I trust this is worth the time I have cleared. I sat, placing my hands on my purse in my lap. I did not lean back. It is, Mr. Blackwell. It is worth far more than 20 minutes. It is worth the Rosewood deal. His face was an impassive mask, but I saw it, a fractional tightening around his eyes. He had been appraising me as a socialite. I had just forced him to reevaluate me as a player. Go on, he said. I did not reach for the files. Not yet. My husband, your vice president, Nathan Hayes, is in the process of defrauding Apex Global Partners. I watched him for any reaction. There was none. He was a stone wall. He is not doing it alone, I continued. He is partnered with your internal legal counsel, Sienna Reed. I reached into my purse, took out the silver USB drive, and placed it on the black stone desk. It looked like a tiny, sacrificial offering in that vast space. On that drive, you will find their entire plan, email chains, audio recordings of their meetings, and the wire transfer histories for the shell corporation they established 3 weeks ago. They intend to purchase the core Rosewood assets, then use their internal positions to approve the sale of those same assets back to Apex for a 300% markup. Their words, not mine. I spoke without emotion. I was not a wife begging for help. I was a curator presenting provenance. This is the object. This is the forgery. This is the proof. He stared at the drive, then at me. Finally, he picked it up, turned to a private terminal on his credenza, and inserted it. He put on a pair of sleek, frameless glasses and began to read. The silence in the room became unbearable. It stretched for 5 minutes, then 10. I could hear the faint hum of the air filtration system. I focused on a tanker moving slowly across the harbor. I would not fidget. I would not speak. I would wait. Finally. He closed the laptop, removed the drive, and swiveled his chair back to face me. He held the small silver object between his thumb and forefinger. "I know," he said. My blood, which had been pumping with cold, righteous adrenaline, turned to ice. "You know. I know, Ms. Reed is a viper," he said, his voice dismissive. "I have known she was insecurely ambitious for at least 6 months, and I know your husband is reckless. He wants the crown without the fight." He leaned forward, and for the first time, I saw the predator behind the CEO. The Rosewood deal was a trap. Mrs. Hayes. It was a piece of proprietary bait, designed to catch someone exactly like them. I knew they would try to steal it. I just did not know the specific mechanics of how— He looked at me, his pale blue eyes analytical. "I did not know they were stupid enough to conduct their conspiracy in your home, within range of a recording device. I did not know they were sloppy enough to have an affair." He tapped the desk. "And I certainly did not know they had compromised an employee in my IT department to cover their tracks." He stood, walking to the massive window and looking down at the harbor. "Their plan to defraud me was predictable business. But this," he said, gesturing vaguely toward my side of the room. "This is different. They involved your family. They used your brother. They conducted their affair while mocking you. They have moved from simple greed to insulting arrogance." He turned back to me, and his face was no longer impassive. It was carved from granite. "They have embarrassed me, Mrs. Hayes, and that is an offense I do not tolerate." "What do you want, Mrs. Hayes?" Blackwell asked. He had returned to his chair, his hands steepled on the black stone desk. I met his gaze. The time for subtlety was over. "I want my brother safe and clean. I want his debt cleared, and I want him out of this. Completely." "And for them," he asked, "I want them destroyed, not quietly. I do not want a discreet email from Human Resources. I want a public execution. I want their ambition and their arrogance turned against them in a room full of their peers. I want it done at your gala." For the first time, a flicker of something new crossed Blackwell's face. It was not just respect, it was appreciation. A thin, dangerous smile touched his lips. "I like how you work, Mrs. Hayes." "Very well." We set the terms. It was a clean, cold transaction. Blackwell would arrange for a consulting bonus to be paid to Julian, an amount that would more than cover his $50,000 debt. That same day, Julian would be transferred to the Apex office in Zurich, effective immediately, under the guise of an urgent IT security upgrade. He would be safe, and he would be silent. "My part is done," I said. "A formality." "And now we move to yours," he replied. "Nathan is bringing Sienna to the gala." I stated, not as a complaint, but as a fact. "He has her listed as his legal associate for the evening." "Excellent," Blackwell said, the word cutting the air. "Let them walk in together, full of their shared victory. But you, Mrs. Hayes, you will not be there. Your absence will be noted." "Oh, I will be there," I said softly. He paused. "I will absolutely be there, but I will not be arriving as his wife." My hand went to my purse, but this time I pulled out the thick, cream-colored invitation, the card that had sat on my desk like a monument to my humiliation. I slid it across the polished stone. "Mr. and Mrs. Nathan Hayes." Blackwell looked at it. "This," I said, my voice steady, is the last piece of tangible evidence of my humiliation. It is the forgery I have lived with. I want you to keep it." He understood. This was the symbolic transfer of power. He picked up the card, his expression unreadable, and placed it in his top desk drawer. He then opened a different drawer and retrieved a single, slim envelope. It was black. "This is a personal invitation," he said. "Only 5 are issued. It bypasses the main list. You will not use his invitation. You will use mine. You will arrive as my guest, after I have arrived." I looked at the black envelope. It was an elegant solution. It was not my solution. "No, Mr. Blackwell," I said. He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of irritation. "I will not use your invitation. I will be using your wife's." The irritation vanished, replaced by genuine surprise. "My wife is in Paris for the next 2 weeks." "I know," I said. "She is attending the opening of the new Impressionist wing. I am a curator. Mr. Blackwell. I always check the provenance. The Mrs. Blackwell's invitation, which is already at the registration desk, will get me in quietly. After everyone is seated, without drawing attention until I choose to." Blackwell allowed himself another one of his rare, sharp smiles. "You have done your research." "But, Mr. Blackwell," I continued, "regarding my invitation," I smiled. "The one I gave to you, I had already given it to your head of security, with a very special set of instructions for the guest list. The gala was not held in a sterile hotel ballroom. Apex, under Blackwell's command, chose venues that spoke of history and power. Tonight, it was the historic Boston Library, its grand hall transformed into a sea of black ties and jewel tones, the scent of old paper mingling with expensive perfume. A string quartet played softly in the vaulted space, their music a thin, elegant veneer over the low, rumbling hum of 100 quiet negotiations. Nathan and Sienna arrived to a ripple of discreet attention. He was the golden boy, and she was a statement. Sienna was poured into a gown of vibrant, almost violent scarlet, a slash of color in the muted, wealthy room. Her dark hair was slicked back, and her hand was firmly, possessively, on Nathan's arm. She was not presenting herself as an associate. She was presenting herself as a prize, a successor. I watched them on the monitors, watched as Nathan scanned the grand staircase, his eyes searching the crowd. I saw the exact moment he checked in with the hostess, saw him glance at the guest list and note my absence. The relief that washed over his face was so profound it was almost comical. He leaned in and said something to Sienna, who laughed. He believed I was at home. He had mistaken my cold rage for the delicate grief of a woman scorned. He thought I was in our Beacon Hill townhouse, shattered, too ill or too heartbroken to attend. He believed he had won. A few minutes later, Arthur Blackwell made his entrance. The room's center of gravity shifted immediately. He moved through the crowd like a shark, parting it with polite nods and handshakes that were, in reality, summonses. He saw Nathan and Sienna. I watched him. He gave Nathan a brief, single nod. It was nothing. It was everything. I saw Nathan straighten, his shoulders squaring. To him, that nod was the confirmation. It was the anointing. It was the promise of the partnership, the final seal of approval from the king. He took 2 glasses of champagne from a passing tray, handing one to Sienna. They found a small alcove, partially hidden by a marble statue. "To us, Nathan," I watched Sienna say on the screen, her voice inaudible but her lips clear. "To the future." Nathan raised his glass. "To the future." Sienna's smile was sharp. She leaned in closer. "And to the end of your museum, wife." Nathan smiled. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. He drank the champagne, absolutely certain that he was the master of his universe, the smartest man in the room. Meanwhile, I was 2 floors above them, in a private study that Blackwell had arranged. It was a room filled with old maps and leather-bound books, a room the library reserved for its most important patrons. Before his flight to Zurich, Julian's final act of service had been to patch me into the special security feeds. He had installed them himself, under the guise of an executive-level security test for Blackwell's speech. I had 4 different angles, all in high definition. I stood in the center of the quiet room, the sound of the party a faint echo below. I was not wearing midnight blue. I had chosen a gown of deep, cold sapphire. It was simple, unadorned, and cut with an almost architectural precision. I was not there as a wife. I was there as an appraiser, and tonight, I was publishing my findings. My phone, resting on a 19th century desk, vibrated once. It was a text message from a number I did not recognize but was expecting. It contained 4 words. The stage is set. I left the study, my heels silent on the marble hallway. I walked not to the main staircase, but to the private entrance I had arranged, the one tied to Mrs. Blackwell's invitation. A security guard, one of Blackwell's personal team, nodded at me and opened the heavy oak door that led to the back of the grand hall. I waited in the shadows, just out of sight, listening as the quartet finished its piece and a polite smattering of applause died out. Then, a new sound, Arthur Blackwell's gravelly voice amplified by the microphone. "Good evening," he began. The room settled instantly. "I am not a man for long speeches. I value action. I value results." He paused, letting the weight of his presence fill the silence. Apex was built on a simple principle: trust. The trust our investors place in us. The trust we place in our team. Loyalty is not a suggestion here. It is our currency. Tonight, we celebrate the future of this firm. From my vantage point, I could see Nathan's table. He was leaning forward, his body thrumming with anticipation. Sienna, in her blood-red dress, was staring at Blackwell with rapt attention, a victorious smile already playing on her lips. They looked like a royal couple awaiting their coronation. And speaking of that future, Blackwell continued, "I want to take a moment to honor a rising star, an individual who has worked tirelessly, who has shown the kind of ambition and drive that defines Apex, the man who has quarterbacked the single most important acquisition of this quarter. Please join me in acknowledging the head of our Rosewood deal, Mr. Nathan Hayes." The room erupted in applause. It was loud, a genuine wave of approval from his peers. I watched Nathan stand up. He did not just stand, he rose, as if being pulled upward by the adulation. He buttoned his tuxedo jacket, smoothed his lapels, and adjusted his silk tie. He beamed, a 1,000-watt smile of pure, unadulterated hubris. Sienna, still seated, squeezed his arm tightly, her face glowing with shared triumph. He was the king of the world. Blackwell held up a hand, silencing the applause. Nathan stood by his chair, waiting to be called to the stage. But before Nathan comes up here to accept his accolades, Blackwell said, his tone conversational, "We have a small, pleasant change to the program." A ripple of confusion went through the room. Nathan's smile faltered, just a fraction. "Nathan," Blackwell said, looking directly at him, "you and I spoke earlier. You mentioned that your wife, Olivia, could not be here this evening." I watched Nathan's body language. The confusion was now palpable. He was no longer the king. He was a student called on by a teacher he did not understand. "That's—" "Yes, sir," Nathan stammered, his voice not carrying, but his words clear on the security feed monitor I could still see from the doorway. Unfortunately, she is unwell. Very unwell." Blackwell nodded, a look of faux sympathy on his granite face. "Unwell, yes. Well, that is very strange. Nathan, because I just saw her." The blood drained from Nathan's face. His smile was gone, replaced by a mask of pale, dawning horror. Sienna's hand, which had been on his arm, was now gripping it like a vice. Blackwell turned from Nathan and looked toward the grand entrance at the back of the hall. He raised his voice, and it boomed with theatrical command. In fact, she is the true architect of tonight's celebration. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my true guest of honor tonight, Olivia Hayes. That was my cue. The security guard pulled open the second grand door. The light from the hall flooded the entryway. I stepped out of the shadows and into the light. Every head in that room turned, 100 faces swiveling as one. The silence was absolute. It was not a polite hush, it was a vacuum, a sudden, total absence of sound. I walked. I did not rush. I kept my pace measured, my chin up, my eyes locked on the stage, on the two men who had defined my life. I saw Nathan. He was frozen, his hand just raising a glass of champagne for a celebratory sip he had planned to take. His eyes were wide, fixated on me. He was not seeing his wife. He was seeing a ghost. He was seeing his executioner. He tried to breathe, but he could not. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He brought the glass up, not to drink, but as a reflex, and he inhaled. It was not a cough. It was a choke, a violent, ragged, desperate gag for air that bent him in half. Champagne sprayed from his mouth, misting the white tablecloth. He dropped the glass, which shattered on the floor, but the sound was lost in the hacking, retching noise he made. His face, which had been pale, was now turning a deep, agonizing red. He was splayed over the table, snot and tears and champagne running down his face, not from alcohol, not from sadness, but from pure, unadulterated terror. The king was choking. I did not stop. I walked past the tables of stunned executives, their faces a sea of frozen confusion. The only sound in the room was the wet, gasping heave of my husband, who was now being held up by Sienna, her scarlet dress a jarring stain against his white shirt. She was patting his back, her face a mask of fury and panic. I ascended the 3 short steps to the stage and stood next to Arthur Blackwell. He looked at me, not with surprise, but with the quiet acknowledgement of a co-conspirator. He had set the stage. I was the lead performer. He held the microphone out to me, and I took it from his hand. I turned to the silent, watching crowd. "Thank you, Arthur," I said, my voice amplified, cutting through the vast hall, clear and cold. "And my apologies for the delay. I was detained, appraising a few last-minute acquisitions." My gaze found Nathan. He had finally managed to get a desperate, whistling breath into his lungs. He was leaning heavily on the table, his tuxedo ruined, his eyes wild and red. Sienna was glaring at me, her hatred a palpable force. "Nathan, darling," I said into the microphone, "you look unwell." "You bitch," Sienna hissed, her voice low but carrying in the silence. "What the hell are you doing here?" I did not look at her. I simply dismissed her. My focus was on the audience. "Good evening, everyone," I said, as if I were opening an exhibit at the Alden. "As many of you know, I am Olivia Hayes. I am a curator. My entire life, my entire career, is dedicated to a single principle distinguishing the authentic from the fake. I appraise art. I study the brushwork, the provenance, the hidden details, to find the truth." I let that hang in the air. "And for 10 years, I said, my voice dropping, "I have been living with a forgery, a remarkably sophisticated one so well crafted, so convincing, that it almost passed as a masterpiece." Nathan had managed to straighten up. He was trembling, whether from rage or fear. I did not care. "Olivia," he shouted, his voice hoarse and raw from the choking. "What are you doing? Stop this. You are drunk. Someone get her off the stage." I looked at him, really looked at him, the way I would at a poorly rendered copy. "On the contrary, Nathan," I said, the microphone carrying my quiet, icy words to every corner of the room. This is the first time in 10 years I have been completely, perfectly sober. I turned my back to him and faced the large projector screen behind the stage, the screen that was meant to show the triumphant graphs of the Rosewood deal. As I said, I am a curator, and I always publish my findings. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to the back of the room, where I knew Julian's final gift was waiting. I nodded to the AV booth, and the stage was set. The screen, which had been a dark, neutral blue, flickered and came to life. It was not a PowerPoint. It was not a graph. It was an email. An email from N. Hayes to S. Reed. Subject Rosewood Shell. The text was clear. The old man has taken the bait. He thinks it's his idea. The dummy corp is funded. He'll be applauding our bonus while we're cashing out. A collective gasp went through the room. "Turn that off!" Nathan bellowed, lunging for the stage, but he was suddenly flanked by two of Blackwell's security guards. They did not touch him, not yet. They just stood there, a wall. "I am afraid there is more," I said. The screen changed. It was not text this time. It was an audio file I knew well. My voice was calm. "Please, listen." Sienna's voice, sharp and arrogant, filled the hall. "And he actually bought it. The whole Rosewood pitch. He thinks it's his idea." Then, Nathan's, "He's an old dinosaur." Sienna, "He just needs to be pointed at the water." Then, the part that sealed their fate. Sienna's laugh. "Does she bore you that much? Or is she just that cold?" And my husband's reply, echoing in the library of his peers. "She's reliable, like a good painting, beautiful to look at, adds value to the room, but you don't exactly want to have a conversation with it." The screen changed again, this time to a complex web of wire transfers, offshore accounts, and the articles of incorporation for a shell company. The forgery was now, officially, appraised and exposed. I stepped back from the microphone, my role as the evening's presenter complete. But the exhibition was not over. The massive screen behind us flickered again. A new audio file. This one was not about me. It was about the man standing next to me. Nathan's voice, relaxed, arrogant, and laced with the confidence of a man who believes he has won. "He's an old fossil, Sienna. He's so obsessed with legacy, he wouldn't spot a real move if it bit him. He'll be retired to his yacht before the ink is dry on our new accounts." Sienna's reply was like a shard of glass. "He's a dinosaur, and we, baby, are the meteor." A new silence, heavier and more dangerous, fell over the room. They had not just mocked me, the wife. They had mocked the king, in his own court. "Lies," Sienna screamed, the sound tearing through the hall. "She is lying. It's all fake. Turn it off." She lunged for the stage, her red dress a blur of motion, her hands clawed, aiming for me. She did not make it 2 steps. The security guards who had been flanking the stage moved with a speed that was fluid and terrifying. They did not grab her. They simply stepped into her path, a solid wall of black, tailored suits, and she crashed into them. Her momentum stopped cold. As she struggled and cursed, yelling, "Get off of me!" The screen changed one last time. It was the final, devastating piece of provenance. No audio, no emails, just the cold, undeniable mathematics of their crime. It was a flowchart showing the Apex-controlled Rosewood Fund, a complex series of wire transfers to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, and finally, the 2 endpoint accounts, registered to N. Hayes and S. Reed. That was it. That was the moment Nathan broke. The anger, the adrenaline, the shock, it all evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, ashen man. His face was a waxy, greenish white. His eyes, which had been burning with rage, were now wide and darting, seeking an escape. He was no longer a VP. He was no longer a star. He was prey. He saw the grand entrance doors, the path of his theoretical escape, and he bolted. He shoved a chair aside and tried to run. He did not make it 2 feet. 2 more security guards, who had been silently guarding that exit, stepped forward, blocking his path. He was surrounded. The grand hall, the site of his coronation, had become his trap. The heavy sound of a hand hitting the microphone pulled all attention back to the stage. Arthur Blackwell moved, taking the microphone from me. He looked at Sienna, struggling against the guards. He looked at Nathan, panting and trapped. He looked at his silent, horrified audience. "The Rosewood deal," Blackwell's voice boomed, a low, controlled thunder, "was, as Mrs. Hayes has so brilliantly demonstrated, a piece of bait. I set a trap. I wanted to see which rat in my own house would be greedy enough and stupid enough to take it." He looked directly at Nathan, and his voice dripped with contempt. "I must admit, I did not anticipate the rat would be so incompetent. So blinded by his own arrogance that he would not only get caught, but get caught by his own wife." The humiliation hung in the air, thick and toxic. Blackwell then turned his gaze to me. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, his voice shifting to one of formal respect. "On behalf of Apex, I thank you for your thorough appraisal. Your diligence has saved this firm from significant embarrassment and financial loss. Our internal legal team will, of course, be handling the rest from here." He turned back to Nathan. The performance was over. Judgment was here. "And Nathan," he said, the name cracking like a whip, "you are not just fired, you are finished. You will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." Nathan actually let out a hysterical, sputtering laugh. "Prosecuted you won't. You can't. You wouldn't dare risk the scandal. Arthur, you'll bury this. You have to. Your internal team will make it go away." Blackwell almost smiled. It was the most terrifying expression I had ever seen. "Oh, Nathan, you still think this is about my reputation? You still think this is about me?" He gestured, not to his own security, but to the heavy service doors at the back of the hall. On cue, those doors swung open. It was not the local police. It was worse. 6 men and 2 women entered the room. They wore no uniforms, only the dark, anonymous, conservative suits of the federal government. They moved with a quiet, efficient purpose that silenced the room more than any shout could have. One of them, a man with a face as impassive as Blackwell's, walked toward the stage. Nathan Hayes, Sienna Reed. His voice cut through the silence. Blackwell leaned into the microphone one last time, a professor concluding his lecture. "You see, Nathan, when I discover rot, I do not call my lawyers to bury it. I call the Securities and Exchange Commission. I call the FBI's white-collar crime division." He looked at me, a final acknowledgement. "I do not cover up forgeries. I exterminate them. I wanted my firm clean." The agents moved past the stunned crowd, one pair toward Sienna, the other toward Nathan. The empire had fallen. The federal agents were silent and efficient. They did not put Nathan or Sienna in handcuffs, not yet. This was a white-glove arrest for a white-collar crime. One agent flanked Sienna, his hand on her elbow, firmly guiding her toward the service exit. She was, for the first time, completely silent, her face a rigid mask of disbelief. She looked broken. Nathan was last. As 2 agents moved to escort him, he stopped, his body immobilized by the weight of his own destruction. He looked across the room, past the stunned faces of his colleagues, and his eyes found mine, still standing on the stage. The disbelief was gone. It was replaced by a look of such pure, unadulterated hatred that it was almost a physical thing. It was a look that said you did this, a look that promised retribution, even though he had nothing left. I did not flinch. I did not smile. I simply held his gaze, my expression perfectly, curatorially blank. I looked at him as I had been trained to look at any object. I saw the poor craftsmanship. I saw the fraudulent signature. I saw the lie beneath the varnish. He was a forgery, and he was, finally, worthless. He was led away. Blackwell, who had watched the entire proceeding with the grim satisfaction of a surgeon removing a tumor, stepped back to the microphone. His voice was a flat, hard command. "The party is over. Thank you for coming." The room did not need to be told twice. It was a stampede of the wealthy, a quiet, desperate rush for the exits, everyone eager to escape the smell of scandal, to distance themselves from the collapse. In less than 3 minutes, the grand hall was empty. The string quartet had long since packed up. All that remained were half-eaten dinners, spilled wine, and the wreckage of Nathan's career. Only Blackwell and I remained on the stage. The staff, unsure, had paused their cleanup. Blackwell let out a long, slow breath. He signaled to a waiter, who brought 2 glasses of what I was sure was very expensive scotch. He handed one to me. "Your brother's flight," Blackwell said, his voice now quiet. "Landed in Zurich 1 hour ago. He is safe, and he is, as of this evening, a very wealthy consultant." "Thank you, Arthur," I said. He looked around the empty, ruined hall. "You saved my company," he said. It was not a compliment. It was a statement of fact. This rosewood forgery would have cost us tens of millions, but worse, it would have cost me my reputation. Apex is in your debt. I looked at the amber liquid in my glass. I had no intention of drinking it. "I did not do this for Apex. Mr. Blackwell," I said. "I did it for my collection." He looked at me, confused. "I hate fakes." I placed the untouched glass on the lectern. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have a divorce to file." I did not wait for his reply. I walked down the steps, my heels clicking on the stage, and crossed the grand hall alone. The staff was moving in now, clearing the shattered glass from Nathan's table. They were the cleanup crew, sweeping away the mess of the party. I reached the grand, vaulted lobby. It was quiet, the air still and cold. I paused by the small marble fountain that graced the center of the atrium. I reached up, my hands steady, and unclasped the 2-carat diamond earrings from my lobes. They were a 10th anniversary gift from Nathan, a symbol of his success, a payment. I held them in my palm for a second. They were cold, and they were heavy. I did not just drop them. I let them fall, one by one, into the flowing water of the fountain. They made no sound, disappearing instantly into the shadows. I pushed open the heavy bronze doors and stepped out into the Boston night. The air was sharp, so cold it stung my lungs. I walked away from the library, away from the life that had been a lie, and I took a deep, cleansing breath. For the first time in 10 years, I was not a painting. I was not a prop. I was real. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to connect with you, so please comment below and let me know where you are listening from and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us your support by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.